This is the Tobago House of Assembly's Post-Executive Council Media Briefing for week ending September 21st, 2013. Chief Secretary Orville London and members of the Assembly informed the media of the issues which arose during their two-day retreat.
We have been participating in, as you know, the two-day retreat, which was called in response to the Tobago allocations in the fiscal 2014 budget. I think you're very well aware of the challenges that those allocations will bring to the people of Tobago, but we recognize that we have a responsibility as the Assembly, given the responsibility to treat with Tobago people's business. We have a responsibility, of course, to take a proactive approach and to do what is necessary to ensure that we bring optimum delivery within the constraint of our budgetary allocations. And in that context, we decided to have the two-day retreat yesterday. The secretaries alone would have met. We were assisted by Dr. London, the former Secretary of Finance, and of course, Mr. Alan Richards, the long-serving Chief Administrator, who would have made presentations in the early session. We must bear in mind that we obviously cannot deliver all that was pledged to the people of Tobago when the Tobago House of Assembly presented its budget earlier this year. And therefore, we have to prioritize, and we also have to ensure that we have a very efficient delivery system. And these are some of the issues which have been discussed. We've been evaluating our delivery process. We've been evaluating our procurement processes. We've been evaluating our management policies and practices to ensure that we're able to bring greater efficiency to the process. After this exercise is completed, we intend to speak to various stakeholders over the next couple of weeks to share with them what our recommendations are. And then based on our discussions today and the discussion with the stakeholders, we will go to the House, not at next week's sitting, but at the October sitting of the House. We'll go to the House and present our budget to the House. Now that we know what the funding to the Tobago House of Assembly is, and after we've had the discussion with the stakeholders, we will then go to the House and present to the people of Tobago what will be the real Tobago House of Assembly budget, where we'll be able, with a much more certainty, indicate what our resources are, what our challenges are, and what we can deliver. And we will make sure that we keep the Tobago populace and all the sectors in Tobago in the loop. I want to just make a comment on 2 or 3 issues. I would have received from an attorney a pre-action protocol letter with respect to an incident which took place at the Division of Education, Youth Affairs and Sport. And I just want to say 2 things about that. One, that in my capacity as Chief Secretary, as a parent, as a human being, I empathize with the young lady and what she would have endured at that venue and in that incident. I, however, want to make it very clear that based on the statement and the information coming from the administrator, I am yet to see the nexus between the officers of the division and the incident having to do with the strip search. My information, and I spoke to everybody up to the Assistant Commissioner of Police, my information is that when a police officer is on investigation, no member of the public is supposed to or expected to interfere with him in the performance of his duties. In fact, it is against the law. And no police officer is expected to pay any attention to any information, advice, instruction, guidance, whatever, given by any civilian in the performance of his or her duties. In addition to that, the statement from the administrator indicated that she was nowhere in the vicinity of the place where the incident took place. In that context, and as I said, the matter is now in the public domain, but it is also subject to legal action. But I found it a little unfortunate that an officer of the court should take the opportunity to publicly ridicule the assembly and its officers, and also to ridicule the police officers. But it is not my job to defend the police officers, and if what they did was indefensible, then they should not be defended. But I take objection to a situation where public officers are being pilloried in this obscene manner by an officer of the court, when that officer of the court knows, based on his experience and based on what he must have known were the facts, that it was very difficult to make any connection between the officers and the incident based on what has to happen in any police investigation. So again, I want to reiterate my empathy for the young lady, and I expect that the division would be making efforts to ensure that she receive the relevant counseling and so on, and the support that she would need. But I find it very, very difficult to accept that the officers of the division, or by extension, the secretary and the chief secretary, should be dragged into this situation in this unseemly manner. And while we're on the question of the police, I was very pained to be informed by the ACP, Assistant Commissioner of Police Eflin George, that he will be going on leave next week or this week. ACP George came to Tobago, I think, less than 6 months ago. And I remember when he came, the first question I asked him, how long will you be staying? Because it has been the practice of the police service to send assistant commissioners of police to Tobago to retire. And I find this quite insulting, really, to us in Tobago, because it obviously takes a little time for any officer to get accustomed to what is in fact a unique situation in Tobago. And time again, by the time the officer has begun to understand the nuances in the Tobago situation, has begun to gain the confidence of the various sectors and his own officers, it's retirement time. I am therefore urging the minister. I had an informal chat with him, and he did indicate that he would like to meet to treat with some outstanding issues having to do with Tobago and policing in Tobago. And I'm looking forward to that meeting so that we can share not just our concerns but our recommendations. Recommendations that we have shared with our various ministers over the years. But I do not believe that we are going to make the kind of progress that we should, because ACP George indicated that there has to be a reason why the crime rate in Tobago has, in some way, where you're talking about crimes like housebreaking and larceny and so on, that the rate has increased, and not only what is most worrisome, increased at a level higher than that of the rest of the country. Not violent crimes, but where you talk about housebreaking and larceny. And the ACP was able to tell me that during a short stint here, he was able to put into effect measures that brought the crime rate down, or the percentage down in those areas by well over 10%. Now you have a situation where he is leaving, and we have been very fortunate from the perspective that the ACPs that have come here have all been highly committed people, lots of experience, but they just simply don't stay long enough. So I really hope that this situation is going to be examined, taken very seriously, and the relevant information and the relevant decisions taken. And finally, I was part of the commissioning exercise last Sunday for Mr. Eric Honourable, where the newly named Eric Honourable Recreational Park at Cudler Hall. And again, I want to repeat Tobago's appreciation for the services that Eric Honourable would have given to the people of Tobago. Eric Honourable was a former president of the Tobago Football League. In fact, I served under him as secretary of the Tobago Football League for many years. But he was also a very avid cricketer, umpire, but I think most importantly, one of the most effective community organizers and community activists that I have known. And I think Tobago, Cudler Hall in particular, but Tobago in general, we owe a serious debt of gratitude to Eric Honourable. And I was quite happy that we have a situation where a fitting tribute could be given to him. And I only hope that the people of Cudler Hall, during this period, understand what Eric Honourable would have done if he had those kind of facilities, and try to emulate some of what he could have achieved if he were in fact as fortunate as they are at this point in time.
In light of the shortfall in funding to the Tobago House of Assembly, the Tobago House of Assembly undertook a 2-day retreat, and I must say that thus far, over the last 2 days, we have been engaged in a process of reviewing all our programs and projects in order to minimize any disruptions in employment in key programs, such as the development program, URP, and CPEP. As you might be aware, our allocation for CPEP this year was 0 thus far. The allocation for URP was only $19 million, whereas the Tobago House of Assembly requested $70 million. The exercise, the retreat over the last 2 days, was also to ensure the completion of outstanding and major projects such as Shaw Park and the library. Also, it was with an attempt to improve project and program deliveries within the Tobago House of Assembly, and more importantly, to identify savings that can be transferred to cover the Assembly's funding gap. Just to remind the media, you may recall in June of this year, the budget that was tabled in the House amounted to $4.98 billion. And what we received from the central government in this year, just the barest minimum of 4.03, was resulting in a shortfall of $875 million under the recurrent program and $1.6 billion under the development program. Resulting in an over $2 billion shortfall in the allocation to the Assembly. Our deliberations over the last 2 days also focused on operational issues geared towards improving the delivery and efficiency within divisions across the Assembly. There are some issues that I highlighted in the budget that we are seeking to achieve. You may recall, such as improving our payment processes so that we can settle all outstanding bills within 10 days. We also touched on some issues within divisions of managing their resources so that we can achieve all those goals that we set in the budget, and also achieving those goals and development goals as outlined in the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan. Deliberations also focus on improving the management of releases and financial resources by divisions. And I must say that our discussions thus far have been fruitful. Our commitment for 2014 and beyond will be focused on the completion of all outstanding and major projects, maintaining employment levels in key social programs, and just to remind persons in terms of the CPEP, CPEP is important in keeping our mantra of clean, green, safe, and serene, and in terms of assisting in the protection of the environment. Throughout our deliberations this week, the Assembly will have to find ways and means to treat with the funding gap, and we'll have to seek alternative funding mechanisms to finance Tobago's development agenda. We cannot be shackled by subvention-based financing, relegating ourselves just to the minimum 4.03%. It's on record that we made several recommendations to the Minister of Finance. You may recall these included a Tobago Development Bond, and as well as other funding mechanisms that are at the disposal of the Assembly, and which we will explore. Because we cannot delay any further. Tobago is at a crossroad in terms of its development, and it's time for us to increase funding for development projects on the island as we seek to develop Tobago, as we seek to advance Tobago's development trajectory. Additionally, we are mindful of the constraints of the Minister of Finance as he tries to satisfy the needs nationally as well as Tobago. However, and that is why we place on the table alternative financing mechanisms that, as is outlined by the Tobago House of Assembly, that we need the approval of the Minister of Finance. We require funding to engage in capital projects so that we can diversify the economy of Tobago away from its dependence on tourism to get into agro-processing, manufacturing, and so that we can advance programs and projects such as the Cove Eco-Industrial Park. You may recall in the budget statement, the Minister outlined that Cove will be designated a free zone, and we look forward to further deliberations on that. But when you look at the funding available to Cove, we will not be, I'm not sure how we'll be able to achieve that. But as is the habit of the Tobago House of Assembly going forward, we'll manage our resources and cut and contrive as we seek to continue to Tobago's development agenda. Some persons might ask why the need for additional funding. And at present, the Tobago economy contributes something like 1.2% to GDP. And if we want to increase Tobago's contribution to the national economic activity, this is the time to invest in the island. Tobago can no longer, the Assembly can no longer be the primary employer on the island, and we are seeking ways and means to encourage economic expansion and economic diversification.
The 2 days of retreat augurs well for team building and more so for improved communication between and amongst key decision makers of the Assembly. And so, to my mind, this will redound in congruence in terms of priorities and a better understanding for us in terms of the challenges, the issues, and the opportunities that exist, and how we as a team can maximize and capitalize on those opportunities, and more so how we can iron out the issues and the challenges that currently exist. And so to my mind, so far it has been very successful, and it has already achieved the objectives that were set out. From the perspective of the Division of Tourism and Transportation, our estimated recurrent allocation to date is $229 million. And of course, we have an additional $13 million for the development of projects. But of course, you know that tourism and transportation contributes about 36% to the GDP of Tobago, and we want to ensure that tourism continues to be the activity that contributes over 14,000 jobs to the Tobago economy. And so going forward out of this meeting, there have been quite a lot of agreements, quite a lot of decisions made. And one of the things that we will try to ensure from the division is that we improve operational effectiveness as much as possible. The Assembly has a 10-day policy in terms of payments of goods and supplies, and we in the Division of Tourism and Transportation, we have endorsed that, and we will ensure that as much as possible we provide payment to our suppliers, both international and local, within that 10-day period. Apart from that, or going forward, we are also working assiduously towards ensuring that Tobago remains competitive. And so there are a number of the areas that we will focus on. One, marketing, development of sites and attraction, airlift standards, and of course, attracting more investment to this island. We have the comprehensive economic development plan that we are following. We have our budget presentation, and of course, our plans and our programs are being guided by the stakeholders, so to speak. And so in going forward, we focus on those initiatives, and also we collaborate even more with the private stakeholders. Lastly, I want to mention that, of course, we know that the airport is hindering our progress as an island. It's hindering the progress of the destination, and we look at the moving of the minister, the former minister of tourism, into the Ministry of Transportation as an opportunity. He understands the needs of the Tobago sector. He understands the needs of the Tobago tourism sector, and we will be approaching him in the not-so-distant future to ensure that we have representation and more so speedy action with regards to the development of the airport. If that fails, then of course Executive Council will have to take a decision in terms of how we will treat with the airport. But the airport is critical to Tobago remaining competitive as a destination. In closing, I want to take the opportunity to extend congratulations to one, the new Minister of Transportation, and two, the new Minister of Tourism, which is Chandra Sharma, and I will be communicating to them in writing the congratulations as well as the intention to have collaboration with those two ministers in terms of boosting Tobago's tourism and ensuring that Tobago continues to remain first and foremost in the minds of international and domestic visitors.
And Mr. London, can you give us your view with respect to the new ban for hunters?
It is one thing to protect wildlife, and obviously in the Tobago context, if that has been worked out and so on. But there's another thing about encouraging pests. Now, I have heard the Secretary lament that farmers in Tobago are saying, we're not planting because we're not planting to feed a Gutian part. And therefore, I would want, if that is what has happened and there has been a ban, they would have done their research and there would be valid reasons for that. But in the case of Tobago, whether you have to introduce some form of culling where you bring in hunters to assist in curbing the growth, because everybody knows how agoutis multiply. And if you give 2 years, with no hunting, whatever, I don't know what is going to happen to our agricultural sector in Tobago. So I think we got to look at it from an holistic perspective. As I said, they would have done, I expect that they will have done the research and they know what are the reasons why you decided on a ban and why 2 years. It might have been 5, it might have been 1. So I'm hoping that thing was well thought out. I'm not arguing that. But I'm saying that we have to look at the Tobago situation and to ask ourselves whether in the case of Tobago and with respect to certain animals, whether it is not counterproductive, because we are not, we don't have the problem of too few agouti in Tobago. I think we have quite the opposite, and I think something has to be done. But I know that in some countries you actually have organized culling, and maybe it is something that can be looked at so that you can get that done, so you achieve both objectives. You protect the wildlife, but you also don't further disadvantage the agriculturists who are really, really suffering. I mean, I have been to places, and when you dig, all you're picking up is shells, and that is very distressing, and it is frustrating the efforts of the agricultural division to resuscitate the agricultural sector.
Thank you for watching the Tobago House of Assembly's Post-Executive Council Media Briefing for week ending September 21st, 2013.